evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to join Network Science in this panel. I'm Pablo Perella. I'm calling you guys from the US, from Miami. And with me, I have four wonderful panelists that we're going to talk about strategies to grow companies and initiatives that are making the most of the new technologies that are available. So, clearly Area 51 is more about aliens, but these are real strategies, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation with our guest. So, with that, I would like to go to a quick introduction. Sandeep is the CEO of Indian School of Finance. He's clearly an expert in finance, having worked with Reliance Capital and Lakshmi Bank in the past, and also a serial entrepreneur. This is not the first company he's leading, and he is really making huge waves in the education industry in India, and he's going to tell us about us. So maybe we'll start with a couple of questions with Sandeep before we go to the next panelist. Could you please tell us a little bit about Indian School of Finance, Sandeep?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Sandeep here, representing Indian School Finance Company. We are the first finance company, NBFC, in Indian space, catering purely to education, that is school, K-12 education school for their infra funding. The objective was obviously to have quality of education, which is directly related to infra financing, infra development of the school. We have funded about 5,000 schools, which means about 5 million students we have impacted. So that's a quick background. A company having a majority shareholding by an impact fund called Grey Matter Capital, US based.
And what's the mission? What are you guys trying to accomplish?
So, as I mentioned, it is more from creating a quality of education directly being impacted by quality of infrastructure. So, in India, there are about 350,000 schools in private unaided category, which means that all these schools generally are not funded by formal banking system. So that is where our role comes in. So we are a bridge between unorganized financiers and a formal banking setup.
Thank you, Sandeep. And you have been very innovative in terms of the type of markets that you have been going after. And this is not your first rodeo, as they call it in the US. You have been also active in the affordable housing market in India. How do you come up with, those ideas about which market present opportunities and what growth strategies you need to deploy for those markets?
So, in fact, interesting question. When I took over, the role in ISFC during pandemic, uh, previous to that, this company was a transactional conventional lender. When I'm saying transactional conventional lender, you go to school, B2B, give them loan, and then come back. This is my product. That's all. But the moment if this is expanded from school to parents, in that case, just imagine the number 350,000 schools multiply by 1,000 parents. That actually gives you a 350 million kind of a customer database. And that's the kind size of market. And which also, if I convert that into receivable of fee financing, in Indian context, it is 350,000 crores kind of market, or in US dollar term, it is 40 billion USD kind of receivable market. And if we convert that even 2.5%, that gives us a clear business opportunity of 1 billion USD. So that's a kind of market segment we are into. The only thing that we needed to look out is how do we reach out to from school B2B to B2B2C. The moment you get into into a technology space, that all is possible, and that's what we are trying to do here now.
Clearly tremendous opportunity, and I don't want to get started in, direct lending or decentralized finance and other things that may be in your plate. In all this area of, I don't know if you define, or your company, you define it also as education tech, edutech. But clearly, there are a lot of things happening with education, and there have been a lot of debate with, now with Chat GPT, etc. BART, and people are talking about the digital divide in education, and you have an interesting view regarding the digital divide. Could you share it with us?
So, Pablo, interesting time actually. I mean, during this COVID, before COVID, we thought that reaching out to the rural areas digitally will be very, very difficult, and it is going to be a 10-year time frame. But whereas we have seen that catapulted clearly during COVID, the perspective about technology and technologically dissemination of syllabus, that has completely changed. There are, I mean, as far as technology is concerned, I can divide this into two segments. One is on a financial technology side, which is generally we call fintech, and another is edtech. So you have on one hand uh, education, uh, education syllabus that is going online. So as of now, there are a lot many edtech players into a course content. Now people are moving into skill, which is directly related to course. There are people who are moving into assessments. So we have complete assessment course, skill, and assessment, that all technology platform is available now in India. India gives a very unique advantage of scale. I mean, why I'm saying this from a scale perspective is because your cost per student actually comes down quite a lot if you get a scale. So just to give you an example of EdTech, today, giving a technology solution online in India in USD is only 100 USD, which is 8,000 rupees in Indian terms. So per annum per student cost comes down to about $100, and this cost, that will give you a complete online education. And then over a period of time, I think people will get into AI, Chat GPT, assessment programs, all those things. So edtech players are available here. The only thing is, over a period of time, now it will get into a tier one, tier two, tier three towns and rural segment. And if you see USD 2,500 as per capita income of Indian consumer, and $100 as technology education segment, it's clearly affordable. So that's how edtech market is defined. On other hand, on technology side, we I mean, all government initiators, payments, payment gateway, digital lending, all those things are happening on technology fintech side. So financial distribution of a product, which was very difficult maybe 3 years, 5 years before, now it is like even $100 loan can be given at fraction of the cost. You have data analytics. People will get into, over a period of time, into AI and all those technology that can be coming in. On an education side, you can get into virtual syllabus course dissemination also.
Yeah, so basically, clearly you see tremendous opportunities. Is really cost is coming down for education, accessibility, and great opportunities. And I'm gonna get some questions from the audience. I'm sure I already have some to you. So with that, Sandeep, thank you. We'll get back to you. I would like to go to our next panelist, Sari, also an amazing serial entrepreneur and also a scholar. Right, Sari? Sari, can you hear me? Sairi, can you hear me?
I'm back. I think I went off for a second. I don't know why, but yeah, I'm here now. Hi, everyone.
Oh, excellent. We have a brief delay. So, I was saying that you are also a serial entrepreneur. You have been actually founding different companies, and now you are what at least I would love to understand from my point of view, a social entrepreneur with Shiros, that is an online community for women
Yeah,
to provide support, business life, etc. And for you also are I would say an academic scholar as part of the Aspen Institute. So it's a pleasure to have you in the panel
thank
with the rest of the panelists.
thank you, Pablo. And yeah, so social entrepreneur, maybe consumer internet founder, have been a beneficiary of seeing the consumer internet grow in India. And the thesis has always been that internet is a tool of good. We all live our lives online, and we are a gender poor country, and we need to put internet to good use. So our thesis is very simple: using internet for economic mainstreaming of women. So creating community platforms, so think Reddit for women. And then of course uh, building employment, entrepreneurship, and now access to capital. We are also building a neobank for women that offers women entrepreneurs productive capital. So in some ways we are taking the historical legacy of women only communities in India. Microfinance had a whole bunch of them, and building like a whole digital gender stack, if you will. So at heart we're a tech company, but obviously the challenge we solve is a pretty steep social challenge at heart. And obviously we do it by building great consumer internet products. So we have the Shiro's ecosystem, which is a multi-asset all women ecosystem. We were perhaps the first company on the internet to build a gender filter. So I know there's a lot of AI now, but about 8 years ago we actually built a gender filter that allows women to be in a safe space online, to be themselves, and then of course find different things like work or like skilling, like becoming entrepreneurs, all in a safe space. And yeah, and now we're bringing capital to that mix as we go along. And of course we've also been a beneficiary of see this market change. So when we first started, maybe internet population was about 10 million users. Today we're talking about 600, 700 million users, out of which maybe 200 million women have come online only in the last 4 5 years. So we are sitting in a very interesting time space continuum.
Yes, so it's very impressive, and one of the things I see is clearly a lot of women. It's a big market if you just
It's a big
define it
market.
like that. How you think about with your team about which are the growth areas or the vectors
Yeah,
that you plan, you think ahead. Now you have 100 million subscribers, you want to go to 600, let's
yeah,
say.
yeah,
There's a and clearly you have to make some decisions about priorities.
yeah.
How you do that, how you prioritize this growth strategy versus the other growth strategy with your team, and how you get them done.
Yeah. So our thesis has been very simple. We know that a lot of our users are aspirational users. So the traditional market approach to building internet products is to build commerce first, to build maybe food delivery apps first, and to build taxi services first. We've taken the approach to saying, hey, this is a person who wants to be part of the economic mainstream. Everything we do has to put money in hands of women. So all our growth levers are designed around that. We work very closely with an entire ecosystem that exists offline. So again, this is an India first model where there is blended approach to building, and traditional internet companies have stayed away from this model. But we obviously, being in India, know that uh, in India hybrid works, omni-channel works. Users like trust first. Our users, women particularly, like trust first kind of products. So our growth comes from a couple of levers. One is making sure that we are very focused on connecting women to economic mainstream. So we say when a woman comes to us, we should be able to put money in her hands, and if we are doing that, well, then we will continue to grow for a long period of time. Two, of course, designing very simple products, and simple products are very hard to build. We all know this is a typical technology challenge. Third is, of course, our data and our user base is changing, and that's what we are uh, constantly tracking. So at heart, there's tons of data at play that we're constantly learning to say what does our user want, and where, what should we build next. So for example, right now we're building a neobank, which is basically, our insight was that a lot of Indian women have gone entrepreneurial. So India women in workforce numbers have not grown, but India women in entrepreneurship numbers have grown through the roof. So we are now catering to an audience that's online, that uses digital payments, that uses a lot of these tools available uh, to connect themselves to the economic mainstream. And our job is to enable them with capital. So this is a process of evolution, and I think it will continue to happen for a long period of time, because we are in a high velocity market where the user knows what quality to expect. They expect a global quality. They expect, like my favorite saying is, poor people don't want poor products. So while Indian women may lack some agency, they don't want to use a second grade product. But at the same time, there's a lot of customization and lot of insight building from this audience that's constantly on our mind, and that's something that we're always working on.
That's fantastic. And let me ask you one more question, and before we go to our panelists, and then we're going to jump to a Q&A from the audience. Do you see clearly an opportunity with the Indian communities outside India? Clearly, it's in the US, in Europe, you see a wonderful entrepreneurship coming from people from Indian origin, immigrants or sons, daughters, etc. Do you see a place there for Shiros?
Absolutely. So, actually, because we're a consumer platform, we already, a lot of our users come from almost 50 plus countries, and obviously the Indian diaspora is part of that. Uh, what we also realize is that, uh, again, there are opportunities to take India first models to the rest of the world. Japan imported PayPay from Paytm, and I think women only communities is very relevant to a lot of markets: Africa, LATAM, Southeast Asia. And we are by far, probably the largest, but also the most advanced in terms of both product as well as monetization. I think ultimately, this is a hard challenge on the internet. How do you monetize? How do you make sure there is adequate amount of value being created for everyone? So we do see that opportunity, somewhere in the future, and we'll see how that plays out.
Excellent. Thank you, Sari. Very, very exciting times for Shiros. What I would like to move to, and actually, I'm going to present our two next panelists, and so they can join us in the screen. I have with me Akash. Akash Podar is clearly an expert in the travel industry. He have been in the last 15 years in Intermiles, in Jet Tramline, Travel Boutique, a number of great companies, and clearly have much more experience than that. But it's focused on the travel industry. That is very hot right now, especially after we were all locked down, or most of the world was locked down from the pandemic situation. And I also would like to invite to the stage Wendy Shelinsky. She's closer to me in New York, the capital center in the world of everything, PR and capital markets, etc. And Wendy is a specialist in analyst relations. And this is something that may be new for many in the audience. So I will go to you, Wendy, very, very soon to get your perspective. But I'm going to get back to Akash. Akash, nice meeting you. Pleasure having you here. Let's start with Intermiles. What can you tell us about Intermiles?
What would you like to know? Thank you for having me on this panel, Pablo and Network Science. Intermiles is the new brand name for what used to be called Jet Privilege. Jet Privilege was the frequent flyer program of Jet Airways. It has 10 million members. It is the most successful loyalty program in India ever. It had a very large valuation way back in 2012 when Etihad entered this business as a 50% partner by investing uh, a lot of money. So Intermiles is the new brand name because Jet stopped flying, but we did have members, we did have unredeemed miles. So we tried to create an ecosystem for them. Uh, Many things were tried. Today, these members basically in this loyalty program make money, make accrue miles, sorry, when they spend on the co-branded credit card, which is on out-of-store shops. Anywhere you shop with a co-branded Intermiles credit card, you will get points, which are funded by the bank. And if you shop on our website or on our app, then also you will accrue points, which are funded by us. Now, uh, when you accumulate enough points, you obviously go and redeem them like in any loyalty program. Unlike a one on one loyalty program where you can only redeem on that particular brand, we are trying to create an ecosystem of different common spend categories like insurance, supermarket, travel, fuel, education, etc. So that since you're already spending that money, yeah, on different brands, you could do that through Intermiles and earn points on it, and basically end up saving money. That's what Intermiles is all about.
Thank you for that. Clearly, I'm amazed as an industry that was one no, travel industry was one of the first impacted by internet, right? Big change, and right now it looks from the outsider a little bit mature. So you are finding new areas of growth within the travel industry, especially when we are talking about miles and I would say recognizing the loyalty of clients and now giving them a much larger ecosystem of where they can use those miles. What you see, what are companies in this space in travel that you are following? Which are companies that are doing things that are disrupting right now in the travel industry beyond just the miles and the loyalty section of the industry?
So I think the travel industry by itself is booming post COVID. In the specific case of India, the GDP continues to rise. Soon will become the fourth largest GDP in the world. Hopefully, with the growing GDP, our per capita income will increase and will also be a little bit more distributed than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So, with GDP growing and per capita income growing, obviously corporate travel and leisure travel both grow. There's so much to see, just in India and of course around the world. Am I following any particular company? I think the big disruption in travel happened 10 years ago or in India or 15 years ago when air ticketing became online. And from paper tickets and running to an agent or running to an airline, you could just book on Expedia or a similar company. And that model was copied by Make My Trip and Yatra in India when e-ticketing became a reality in India. Um, Little bits here and there of disruptive thinking based on digital technology have taken some companies to pole position in their respective spaces. I'll give you an example. So Travel Boutique Online is a B2B company, and it is a very large company. It exists and it has presence in over 100 countries around the world. Now, what they did was very simple. They get a digital feedback from hotel aggregators like Expedia, like hotel beds. Yeah. They get a digital feedback for booking and cancellation. And the cancellation doesn't kick in up until 7 days before check in most cases. International travel in India is always booked in advance, 30, 60, 90 days in advance. So they gave the option to their sub agents, their B2B, so they work with travel agents, to book an international hotel without paying any money. So they digitized the whole concept. They allowed the agent to see three, four, five options in the consumer space in the as per the choice of the customer. They allowed the travel agent to email these three, four options to the customer. The customer confirmed, they booked it, they froze the price, they took the money or did not take the money from the consumer was their choice, but they didn't have to pay Travel Boutique Online. As a result of this, Travel Boutique Online is the top 10 distributors for hotels for companies like Expedia, hotel beds around the world. And then they took this model international. Anybody else can still do it, but I don't know why they don't do it. So TBO's sale in hotels in India is, I don't know, $300 million per year, which is very large. Okay, this is one example. A lot of disruption in travel is now happening by new startups. So there are companies like Pick Your Trail, which is doing a digitized holidays package, okay, which is typically an offline assisted model for most people, but they're doing it, and in their second or third year, they're already over 100 crores in over 300 crores in sales. So $1 million is 8 crores, and you can do the math. But I'm not sure if I'm following a lot of other companies which are doing any sea changes in terms of travel. I'm just trying to rebuild my business. And my business, which is into Miles, is not just about travel. Like I said, it's moving towards an ecosystem of common spend categories to create something like, for those who understand the Indian ecosystem, something like a Tata New, but outside the Tata ecosystem.
Very interesting. I think one takeaway from the conversations with Sandeep, with Sari, and with you, Akash, is that clearly you are taking the most of the new technologies available from clearly how to reach consumers or subscribers in a very, I would say, I like the approach that Sari, you said, using the internet as a tool of good, right, with simple products, and also a place that from that you can do fantastic things with the data that is being generated, and you put this additional factor that is financing in the mix, like the grease that makes things move, and maybe making all these consumers and subscribers to stay in your ecosystem, because you're making things easier for them. Right. So that's something that, at least from my point of view, we see happening in India much faster than in other places. Maybe China and financial in the past. I don't know how are things right now, etc. Between the Alibaba Group, etc. But it's very, very interesting. So before we go to additional questions, I would like to go to you, Wendy, because you are in the different space, right? You are in an area that is sometimes not very well understood, especially by entrepreneurs or startups. That is the area of how you work with industrial analysts, right? To generate, certain things that I would love you to tell us about. Maybe I start with the basics. What is the role of an industry analyst in this new world of deep tech?
Sure. Thanks so much for the question, Pablo. And thank you so much, Deep Tech, for including me on this panel. I think in general, analysts can help any technology company understand their market better, figure out what their roadmap should be, help them figure out their messaging and their positioning. And in reality, they are a prospect. They are a proxy for prospects. So prospects of the technology company. And that's it in a nutshell. Whether you're a startup entrepreneur or you have an established technology company, I think you can take advantage of what the industry analysts have to provide.
And you have been you're an expert in the field, and you have worked with companies, from Forrester to Infosys. You have worked with Cognizant. So very, very experienced. And what is specifically the role of an analyst relations specialist, and what is
So
important for companies?
sure. So my job is I feel like I'm a concierge between the companies I work with and the industry analysts. So I help them navigate the complexities of working with industry analysts like Gartner, Forrester, IDC, Horses for Sources, Everest Group. There's probably 200 plus analyst firms and growing. So I help my clients and the companies I've worked for figure out which of those 200 analyst firms and which of those 3 or to 10 analysts inside those firms they should be working with based on their goals. So that's really how I view myself and people like me.
In the US, from my own experience, it is very common working with industry analysts when you're putting together strategies, where you're trying to understand, for instance, where to find, for instance, places with would incentive to invest, to finding to actually seek talent. There's a worth of knowledge that the industry analysts have. Uh, what is the situation outside the US? Because it's very mature here, really well known. For instance, have you have any experience with industrial analysts and industrial analyst relations building in Asia or in India?
Well, it's funny because with the global economy and the internet and all of the tools that we have to connect, like even just the five of us on this panel, I think 3 of us are calling from India and 2 of us are calling in from the US. So where somebody's located is less important than what they do. So like when I worked for Infosys, actually, they're an Indian company, and I replaced somebody who was based in India. And it's fun. I like to say that because so much of the time the Indian outsourcing field is riddled with people like, oh, you're replacing my job. I don't like that. And I'm like, I've replaced Indians' jobs. Like, it's all about finding the best person wherever they are located. Like, one of my industry analysts, when I worked for a contact center outsourcing company, one of their key analysts was based in New Zealand. And a lot of the executives are like, we're not targeting New Zealand. Why are we talking to somebody in New Zealand? And I said, well, he just lives in New Zealand. He is the best proxy for our clients because our clients are talking to him about contact center outsourcing. So with the global economy, where people are located, I think is a lot less important than what they can do for them. That said, there are a lot of analysts who are based in India who work with American companies and who both their company is based in America, as well as their company is also based in like different ones are based in India. So there's all kinds of new startup analyst firms that have different focus areas, and that's really how like someone like me or one of my competitors can help a company really navigate the landscape based on their goals. So my analyst relations colleagues who live in India and in Europe do find that there are more opportunities in the US. And in general, I think the US has, other than India, a much larger, because of the size and the growth and that sort of thing, much larger, a lot more companies to choose from. But the analyst relations profession has grown substantially. Like when I started, there were probably only 100, 150 people in analyst relations. And now there's probably more like 750, 1,000 people around the globe. I mean, even the technology that we're using to talk to all of you now didn't exist when I started. That's just, one example. I don't want to age myself, but it's true.
Thank you, Wendy. One thing I learned also from my uh, specialty chemical industry days is if you don't tell, if your company don't tell the story to the analysts, they're gonna create a story for you, right? And sometimes the story is that's not much what you're trying to accomplish. What kind of advice you have, especially for startups and entrepreneurs, business leader in a fast growth trajectory that like Sandeep, Cash, and Sari, to get the most of a relationship with industry analysts.
I like to say, think about how you build relationships with other people. And industry analysts aren't any different from regular people in the long run. So, how do you do it? You research who your person is, you understand how they like to connect, and you connect with them in that way. It's not The challenge is that they're all individuals, so making gross generalizations is difficult. Like I had a few analysts say, without a doubt, if you want to engage with me, you have to go through the proper channels. Do not engage with me over LinkedIn. And then there's other analysts who are like, how come I want people to engage with me over LinkedIn? So there's a lot of different ways to engage and to speak with analysts. And the number one thing I think is to be respectful. Just like you want someone to understand what you do, you want to understand what the analyst is. So like if you're talking, travel technology, you want to make sure you're talking to an analyst that covers that market. You don't want to talk to you don't necessarily want to talk to a banking analyst. You might, because you want to find the synergies between banking and travel. You might want to really understand like what's so hot about the banking industry, and can we take that learning and port it over to travel? But talking to people in travel can be much more useful sometimes, if that's a good example.
No, I think it is. Thank you, Wendy. I'm gonna get back to you. We're gonna have now some questions that have received from the audience. I think one that I will ask for all of you to give me your perspective, but it's related to the new U.S. India partnership. And clearly, I think this new moment between India and the US, I would say, to grow together, often opportunities to accelerate business, among other things, with cooperation, etc. So maybe I start with you, Sandeep, because of education, especially from the side of the US, there are a lot of challenges here, a lot of challenges. Um, have you been thinking about opportunities outside India, a specific U.S. market? What is basically being discussed right now in the industry? Oh, you're on mute. Okay, maybe when we wait for him to come back, I may go and have the same thing, the same question for you. And you touched a little bit about this, sorry,
Yeah.
with the Indian diaspora. But what's your perspective of
Yeah.
the opportunity with the new Indian-US partnership?
Absolutely. So it's funny, while we built a consumer business in India, a lot of our allies are US. So obviously our capital base is US. So that's a very, very clear relationship. And I don't see that changing. In fact, I think that's going to further grow. Many years ago, we actually uh, started about 8 years ago, before remote became mainstream. We started a small experiment to create a remote work platform where women in small town India could work for companies around the country. And now we're actually exporting that same offering to the US, so
Okay, I think we.
little different because this is a platform that sits between, let's say, gig work and outsourcing. So a little more agility, lot more ability for cyclical businesses, growing companies, Series A, Series B companies, kind of stage. But US is a clear ally for India in technologies. I mean, all said and done, there isn't a technology company that's not built on back of Google, Amazon, Facebook, to begin with. So big tech, big data, and of course now AI is the new race where we're all going to be relying on US massively. The way we think about it is, US has got the tools. US is where a lot of this ammunition is, but India is where all of this is going to get deployed. So very, very clear synergies there, for sure.
Okay, so you already have strong connections with the US.
Very, very strong. Very, very
And
strong.
important. And what about you, Akash? How is Intermiles? I clearly you are more focused on India as a market, but what do you see happening? One thing I'm, for instance, I've never been to India
We
and
need to bring you there.
have been in my bucket list for a long time. And I was talking with friends in the 4th of July, and basically we are putting a plan together to go to India. And it's not just me; something is happening, right? But still, I think the number of arrivals from the US to India may not be as big as you potentially would like them to be. What are you seeing happening?
So, not in the context of my organization, which is currently only India focused, but what I see happening is a much wider collaboration at multiple levels. And I, I, I'm I'm a big Modi fan for the last many years for the simple reason I'm 55 years old. I have never ever voted during the elections. Why have I never voted? Is because unless you have a mandate, which the Modi government has now for the last two terms, in a democracy the size of India, it's so hard to do anything. Yeah, for every pull there is a push, and it's just impossible to implement anything. For the knowledge of all who are foreigners on this particular platform, I think by and large, whatever Narendra Modi's government is doing was actually planned and architected in the previous regime of the Congress government under Dr. Manmohan Singh. But they never got a chance to execute it. The demonetization, the GST, everything was scripted at that time, but nobody had the guts to execute it because there's so much opposition in the upper house, in the lower house. If you understand the game of cricket, there's a great cricketer called Sachin Tendulkar. I don't know if you've heard his name, right? So there's a saying which says that every time Sachin Tendulkar was out, there were 1.2 billion opinions on how he should have played that shot because we were a 1.2 billion country at that time. So I think Modi is also fundamentally what happens, and you guys know that politicians don't have a mind of their own. They may have a vision, but they get the strategies and inputs from the bureaucrats who are the educated people who have traveled, who understand strategies, developments, who follow global things. And he's picked the right coterie of people to guide him and is listening to them. Corruption is not possible to eradicate in any ecosystem, but I think we've done a much better job of managing the money. The disruptive things he has done, for example, 630 crore Jan Dhan bank accounts for the rural people, money going directly into those accounts, eliminating intermediaries. These are master strokes. We don't have a social security system. Masterstroke to give them free food over the 2 years of COVID. Those vote banks are permanent for as long as he's alive. So now he's taking it one step at a time to create his global leadership positioning.
And we see from the outside that there's also having an influx of Indians that have emigrated and been successful outside India, either coming back or integrating things. So I think that is bringing India to the forefront of every single business conversation and actually cultural conversations. So that's a very interesting moment.
So let me just stop you there, Pablo. That is not true. In
No.
my view, in my books, I'll tell you what, all these great Indians didn't get opportunities in India, like Wendy was saying. The opportunities in America, because of their consumerism, are always going to be greater than India, even for the next 20 years. But these brainy people got picked up by the smart owners of companies like Microsoft or Google or Meta, whatever you want to call them, and they created, uh, value for these organizations. But by the way, these same Indians did not think much of India up until 4 or 5 years ago. They thought India was still, what it was 15, 20 years ago. I have friends who are doing extremely well in the US, but they always thought India was a slum. But now, with whatever is happening in terms of our ability to manage tax collections, growing GDP, industries coming up, collaborations with different parts of the world, helped by the COVID situation, which basically created a trap for people who were totally invested in China from a sourcing perspective, they started respecting this country. So now they speak for India, okay? And therefore it's coming together. I mean,
Got it.
that's my view.
Thank you for that. We are having some issues with Sandeep coming back because of microphone problem. So I would like to potentially move back to you, Wendy. And clearly you have a perspective from everything that is going on in the U.S., right? And especially with the talk of a potential recession in the future, right? What is basically the word within industry analysts? What are the companies talking with them in terms of where the growth is going to come? It's not coming from the U.S. economy in maybe in the next couple of years.
It's an interesting question because even though I'm based in New York, since I went out on my own a couple of years ago, I've had more European clients than I've had American clients. I don't, maybe it's just because of the time zone. I'm in New York or, what have you. But I think I really do believe in the global economy. And let me tell you, you really need to get to India. India is a phenomenal country. And I mean, what country really isn't? I don't think there's a country on my list that is not, I don't think there's a country in the world that I don't want to visit. But I'm an adventurer. Anyway, back to your question. I think India's startups are growing. Like every time I talk to my colleagues in India, they're like, it's amazing, Wendy. There's so many startups. They're doing so many really interesting things. They're creating opportunities for employees to prosper. And how do all of those startups figure out how to work with the analysts, and can they all work with the analysts? I think there's a lot of different, there's different reasons to do it. Improve your product, listen to what the customers are looking for, and using the analysts as a proxy for their clients or their prospects, but also for messaging. And at the same time, analysts might not be the right target or the right channel, for example, for every single startup. I think you really need to look at what are you trying to sell? What are your goals for working with an analyst? And in some cases, the process might be too challenging. While analysts want to hear from startups and they don't it's not necessarily a pay for play model, it can be expensive to buy the research, engage with the analysts, like expensive from a monetary perspective as well as a time perspective. Like the analysts don't want to hear just from someone like me. They want to hear from the executives. They want to hear from the CEO, from the head of product. They want to hear from the chief technology officer, the innovation officer. They want to have a broad engagement with the different tech startups. Now,
Yeah.
if you're like a 4-person startup, that could be really challenging to make the time, forget about the money, just to make the time to speak with analysts. So you might want to just look at what is your growth trajectory and when is the right time to speak with an analyst. And it could be, once you have a number of clients, or the number one thing I always say to prospects who are thinking about analyst relations is, are your prospects coming to you and talking about industry analysts? Like, are they asking the question like, oh, how come you weren't in this analyst report? And if they're not, then you might be too early to work with analysts. That said, even on the early stage, I think they can be valuable, but you've got to have a good plan and a solid plan, both from a monetary and a time perspective.
Thank you. And I think it's important for like leaders like we have here to be present in this type of events, get the name out there, because that's how analysts will get to know them, right? And know that they are great communicators and like to talk to them. I'm going to go some more questions from the audience. I have Meher Kaur asking about very important concern, that is privacy and data protection. So, Sari, I will go to you and to you, Akash, about, as you are growing very fast and you're connecting all these different solutions for subscribers and consumers, how you managing that? How you're protecting the privacy and the data?
So let me begin by saying that I think as we built our platforms and we work with women, and if you know, just by broad numbers, even in large platforms like Meta and LinkedIn, Twitter, women are less than 20% of the whole user base, and Indian women are even a much smaller percentage. And privacy and trust is a big factor why this happens. So when we started building out, our first North Star was privacy and trust. So uh, almost 6-7 years ago, we started investing in creating gender filters, machine learning models to pick out spam, to detect frauds online. I think much before, I guess the world was talking about it in a consumer internet setting. And that's been actually partially the reason why our users are loyal to us, because we put safety first and we put trust first in the ecosystem. And the other thing that was important was, we know that a lot of consumer internet is monetized by ads, and ads is where a lot of privacy gets lost. Because if I know you're clicking on my ad, I also want to know who are you, and then I want you to fill something, and that number goes through. So that's how leakages start. At a small level, it starts with one number and then it becomes billions of numbers. But the way we monetized our platforms was that, hey, we're not going to use the traditional models. So in our system, the user data doesn't ever leave our system. It doesn't go out to anyone, no advertisers. So we're not an advertising driven business. Uh, and if at all a user has to, for example, if you want to get employed, you need to do your KYC, but it's in a very confirmed setting. It's not a generic setting. It's not going to a random person. It's going to somebody who's probably going to employ you. So it's very, very specific. So building safeguards around user experience is non-negotiable, especially for first-time internet users, because you're going to otherwise lose them. And we are talking to women who are in the first decade of internet usage, actually the first 5 years, not even a decade yet. They're new to digital payments. And of course, there's a whole plethora of apps. And if you're following the Indian financial services sector, it's grown massively, but it's also grown on back of growth at all cost. And what that means is that there are shortcuts that get taken from time to time. Uh, Basically, people have loans they don't know they've taken because they clicked something on a website and said, yes, agree and I agree became a loan, and then the regulator has to step in. So I think the important thing is to prioritize this at a PNN level, because these are not post facto calls you can really solve. I mean, yes, you can solve them. I mean, then they are mostly mending exercise, they're patchwork exercise, because then you're just trying to stop the leakage. But if you really are serious about these issues, then you solve them when you're writing a business plan and not much later. And that's the approach we've taken. And for our audience, that's probably the number one reason why it's a productive experience for them.
Thank you. Clearly, you have thought very well with your team about this. It's super important. And Akash, I will also love to have your perspective. And actually, I have another member of the audience, a Ashish Nair, that is also asking you some additional questions about the use of blockchain, smart contracts, uh, in shaping the online travel industry transactions. I would love you to tackle both aspects, data protection, privacy, and also these new technologies.
Okay, so let me try and get to the first one first. I have a slightly different perspective on this. Okay, nobody is going to appreciate this coming on a public panel. There is a term in India called jugaad. And jugaad basically means how to make something happen. Okay, even if you don't have the tools to do it. Now, I I don't know how many people read the TNC, which runs into 7, 8 pages in micro fonts before they say I agree. I don't know how many people read the terms of a simple cookie policy before they say accept cookies if they're interested in that website. So fundamentally, the human psyche is if it's convenient for me, I don't give a damn if some of my data goes out, but don't bother me with spam, okay? And don't cheat me on something that I don't want to do. Now, I put that on one side. You look at, you go to all the big data people and they're talking about first data. Okay. So if you are collecting first data, what are you going to do with it? What are the data analysts going to do with it? If you cannot put that data into monetization, then that data is worth nothing. So there are ways and means of using PII data in bundles which are not exposing your name individually. You make a subset and then you do a segmentation and then you use that segment's emails and phone numbers to send out material, and that will happen. If that doesn't happen, then I don't think businesses can take advantage of uh, individual people's data. We're talking about micro segmentation, zero moment of truth, first moment of truth, all these different face recognizing technologies. What are you doing? You're reading into people's minds and hearts, right? And that's that's a lot more than taking your phone number and your email address, correct? So I think there are ways and means that will be found to monetize data, and they'll help people think that they are safe and that data is protected, and there will be ways and means of doing it. That's my thought process. At Intermiles, we don't share people's individual data to other people, but we do marketing for other product launches in our database. We use our database through a survey company called Dynata to run surveys, which is a monetization tool, both for Dynata and for us. I'm just giving you examples. So is it going to go away? I don't think it can go away. It doesn't make economic sense. But the data privacy policy is still being written in India. It's still being finalized in India. The first draft was out for public feedback. And as and when it is done, there will be that bloody nodal officer, and all those things will happen. You know how you structure these things to fool the public, and that will happen.
Uh,
But
I think, yeah,
data
go
will be
ahead.
used. Data will be used by some hook or crook.
Excellent. I think that, clearly as you talk about an ecosystem, whoever uses an Intermile card knows that the companies in the ecosystem have, the data is the logical assumption, kind of permission marketing as they are
Yes.
part of it. So, Akash, I think, sorry, Wendy, we have reached the end of this panel. sorry we don't have Sandeep with us anymore. It has been really a pleasure to talk with you. I hope that the audience found it very valuable. And I look forward to a certain point meeting you and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Bye.